Hey listeners, today's episode is part 2 of our episode with Dr. Mahdi on the prevalence of autoimmune conditions amongst women. We specifically dive into the tools of managing the stresses that upregulate our genes so that we can bring our body back to a state of homeostasis. And as always, the content discussed in this episode is for educational purposes only and shouldn't be replaced by personalized professional medical advice. Hey guys, I'm Tasha.
Hey listeners, this is Goonie.
And you're tuned in to Dr. the podcast, where we chat and explore all things on integrative medicine. And so we've been talking about how stress and burnout can influence the state of your health and state of your immunity, right? What is the link for autoimmune conditions? How does it actually get to that state of being like a disease?
Yeah, many a times the body will always give you warnings and signals. For example, I'm thinking about an MS patient specifically that I was working with quite some time ago. He was a college professor, brilliant musician. He was in the School of Music. And he lived, like when you're in colder environments, what we also see with MS, specifically colder environments, one will become more prone. Again, if the predisposition is already there within the genetics for that to express itself. And so he was living in a very cold environment where his wife's family was from. So they moved to this area, and innately he didn't want to be there. But this is why that going unexpressed in him and him not wanting to communicate that and acknowledge that within himself and communicate to his wife that I'm not really aligned with this environment, started setting up a predisposition within himself that he continued to negate himself through other things that he was doing in his life, constantly saying yes to things he should have said no to, that he wanted to say no to, and not having these boundaries that began to establish a condition of more stress being put on him because, again, he's not even listening to himself anymore. So underneath that, he's creating more of a stress condition. Also, the foods in which he was eating, he wasn't eating very healthy. He wasn't making choices around food that was very supportive of the nervous system, like getting in healthy oils. Oils are essential, specifically omega-3 oils are so essential. Also, healthy omega-6s are essential for the nervous system to keep it regulated, to keep it healthy, specifically that myelin sheath. And that's where MS attacks. The immune system attacks the sheath that covers the nerves. So it's like the fat insulator around the nerves that keep them conducting fast as far as nerve impulses are concerned. That is attacked. And so choices he was making around the food selection, he wasn't getting in healthy fats that the body needed, not honoring himself and living in an environment that was not conducive for him. All those things set up a predisposition for that expression. And so as we start going back in and unraveling his life and his life story, we start seeing the patterns there. And so there's always going to be patterns, and the body's very unique to each of us. Some situations, like for example, Tasha, you may be completely non-responsive to, non-reactive to. Your body's like, I'm good here. I don't have any issue. Where myself, if I were to come in that same environment, I would have an issue with it. My body would have an issue with it, and I would show some kind of physical expression to my body reacting in an adverse way. And so we also have to look at how, just again, going back to the genetic composition of who we are and how that's being translated through the life choices and experiences. So every time you have any autoimmune condition, there's going to be a pattern, but we can't just say, oh, is this over here is the cause or this is the cause. We have to really go back in and unpack the whole story to find what choices and what experiences are all correlated with this.
And how it's going to express itself in your body, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the example you gave kind of reminded me of my dad, who himself was in a situation where he was very unhappy in where he was living. And we, as his family, saw he's being unhappy and what it could cause in terms of health issues. And so some people in a certain environment, it could go towards the autoimmune disease, or it could go into another thing. And so, I'm touching wood here, but there are things that you want to listen. So what we had to do is to encourage him and say, okay, you know what, do what's going to make you happy, or what do you need to do for yourself, so that not only will you be healthy, but happier as well. And you'll be expressing, as you were saying, what you're truly here to do. So I truly resonate, but not everyone has the luxury, sometimes I want to say, to own up to your choices or your decisions, because your decision will impact other people's lives, etc. What do you think, or what would be kind of your advice for someone who is in the situation where they know, that they're in a state where they have to make a decision, but there is a lot at stake?
Well, it's a very good one. And a lot of times people have struggles with that specific issue when other lives are going to be impacted by the choices you make. However, ultimately, you cannot blame those others on your state of affairs if you are not courageous enough to act. And what I always challenge my clients and students with is this: when you show up authentically as yourself and you make no apologies for it, you unconsciously give others permission to do the same. And in addition to that, when you are honestly and authentically honoring yourself and serving yourself, when you make choices now from that lens, the people who are supposed to be in your life will remain there. Those that it's time for their journeys to go elsewhere will have no choice but to do so. Right. And that is the journey that we all are on. And so ultimately, the responsibility for your journey, the responsibility for your life experience is solely and 100% in your hands based on the choices you choose to make every single day. And when it comes to family, I know that can be very challenging.
Yeah. Tricky, very tricky.
It can be tricky. And it's a very, torrential terrain, to kind of navigate through and really come to a place where there is, agreement across the board. But if you fail to do so, because ultimately it's about your journey and your life here. And if your life is cut short because you're unwilling to make choices, how's that going to impact them?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to really look at it from that place and trust that connection that we all have with one another. Everything will work out for its highest good when we step from a place seeking our highest good.
Right.
And not seeking to infringe upon anyone else's journey. Yeah. And doing things from fear. Because that's where, when that fear lies within us unexpressed, that's when we start setting the germs or the seeds for imbalances to show up in the body.
Totally agree.
Yeah. That really resonates with me. A quote that I often fall back on if I'm frustrated and I feel like I'm not making progress on things is, what you don't change, you choose. So it's Absolutely. Like, if you don't make the choices to change the circumstances you're in, then I guess you have to deal with it. And if you know you're conscious of it, then you can't really blame anybody in that scenario, right?
Not at all, especially when you have awareness around it.
So if we were to talk about autoimmune diseases, for the ones who are genetically predisposed, you come to this world with something that is already expressed in your gene that kind of is already destroying themselves. What do you think would be steps that they can take forward to help the situation?
Well, I think the first thing is doing an inventory within yourself and really ask yourself, some really tough questions. Am I being honest with myself? Am I really being truthful with myself right now in the state of affairs in which my life is and how I'm experiencing my life? And we all, on a conscious level, know deeply when we are not being true to ourselves, truthful with ourselves and with those around us. And so it really comes back to, first and foremost, taking an inventory of self and really finding a genuine appreciation and love and value for who you are as you are, the so-called good and bad, just taking it fully in with acceptance. And it's from that space that you begin to really restructure your life in a way that truly serves you. And I think one of the things my father asked me a very long time ago that really resonated with me at a time in my life where I was struggling and I was at a crossroad about what I wanted to do. And he asked me, he's like, son, has the choices in your life thus far, have they served you? Don't worry about me, mom, or your siblings or your friends. Have the choices that you made in your life thus far, have they served you? And as he posed that question to me, my eyes started welling up with tears. Because I already knew the answer was no.
Right.
I've been making choices for everyone else except myself. And I said, no, Dad, I have not. He said, well, son, it's about time you start making choices that do. He said, don't worry about what I think, what your mother thinks, what anyone else thinks in this life. He says, your life. You have to give an account for it when it's all said and done. So I would encourage you to start making choices that serve you. And so I would pass that same message on to the viewers and listeners of this podcast, is that after you do that inventory and you become clear about who you are and where you are and what it is you really desire, start making the choices that are aligned with that and making choices that really serve you.
So that's one. And I think that it's
a big one.
It's an exercise. It's an exercise that I think we could unpack on another episode, because where do you even start? How do you even inventory yourself?
Because you start right now. You start in the moment.
But what direction? Because I would be thinking, because I was in a state a few years ago where I just like, wow, cool, inventory of self. Right, thanks. But where do I start? Do I have to go to a therapist? Where do I have can I have a checklist, for those people who
Well,
need
yeah, I get it.
structure?
It's good.
But you
I
see
feel
what I
you.
mean?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel
there's
you
a
on that.
lot.
Okay,
There's a
yeah.
lot.
Yeah. And so the thing is, yeah, there's a process to this. And many times you will need guidance. And that's what we do within the OKAN Journey. It's like many times you will need guidance. You will need someone to be able to hold the mirror up to you, who will do that objectively without bias and say, hey, this is the state of affairs. What do you want to do about it?
Mhm.
I always like to say we come into this life. I come into this life as me with this body on this earth with my mind, my dreams, and my imagination.
Right.
What do I want to do with it?
Mhm.
We're all given that a body, this earth to navigate on, our imagination and our dreams.
Right.
How do you want to use those things here to create the life you desire for yourself? And so sometimes you may need, someone to objectively guide you and hold you accountable to self. And I've had that in my journey. And I think it's very important that people seek that out, because sometimes we can get so consumed. We're like a fish in water. We don't even see the water or as I say, the forest for the trees. We don't see it because we're so immersed in it. And so we need that objectivity, that unbiased analysis and assessment, and someone to hold us accountable who doesn't have any personal dog in that fight, that can really call it as it is for you, so that you can now start making the choices that you need to make. And so it may require you to step into a situation where you have someone who can mentor, guide, and coach you.
Right.
Provide that therapy that is necessary to help you navigate it, especially if there's a lot of trauma that has to be unpacked specifically.
So we talked about inventory of self as a first step. What would be your second point of guidance with regards to that?
Kind of going back to the body. The body is the limiting factor in all of this, specifically the nervous system, but making choices that really honor and support the body. And that we now look to food. And so I always like to tell my clients and students, take your meds, MEDS, okay? Meds, the M stands for meditation and prayer. So taking time to meditate and be still and breathe, okay? E is for exercise. The body is designed, as I said earlier, to move. That's the only purpose it has. So making sure you're moving your body consistently on a daily basis, that you allow it to engage and move those, beautiful, amazing fluids within you, as far as your blood, your lymphatic fluids, to really get the body in a place where it can heal and regenerate and restore itself in a very efficient way. The D is for, of course, diet and nutrition and supplementation. So eating as many high vibrational foods. And what I mean by high vibrational foods, living foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains. So having at least 80% of your diet, daily nutrition, coming from those sources. If you can't, eliminating processed foods. And what we mean by processed, anything when we take, for example, if I take a sweet potato out of the ground, I cut it up, put some oils on it, and I pre-fry it and then throw it in a freezer bag, and I put it in a grocery store and I give it to you. That is a processed food. It's a more healthy one instead of like a bag of chips, but it's still a processed food. So eating more whole foods on a consistent basis, that's the D. The S in meds is for sleep and relaxation.
Love it.
Taking
this
time
is definitely
this is gonna be
taking time to get your sleep.
Take your meds.
Take your meds. Take your meds. Taking time to rest and relax. Allow the body to heal and regenerate, and being still, getting into that parasympathetic state of just breathing in deeply, using the diaphragm, expanding out the belly, impregnating the belly with breath, and allowing that to begin just to relax you, and going into that sacred sleep and rest at night, so you can recover and regenerate. So that would be the second thing, like taking your meds. Third one I would say is to now make sure that you are just, as much as you can, staying proactive in your actions, carrying out the necessary actions that you know you need to do, and being committed to your actions and commitment to action every day. Because we live in a three-dimensional plane of existence. We got time, space, and matter. And everything in this plane of existence takes time. And it's in motion. And so for you to be aligned with time, you have to be in motion with time. So you have to take action. You can't just sit there and come up with all these wonderful plans about your life and then not take the
100%.
steps to implement them because we live in a physical plane of existence where it requires physical motion and movement in order to manifest and create. So that would be the third one I would say.
Yeah, very actionable. You gave like the really two good points of taking an inventory of your life and where you're at, and then actually taking your meds, and the how, like keeping track of how you actually do or take action on number 1 and 2. So action points, which is the most often forgotten step in goal setting. So I guess like as a closing to this, because we were talking about how 80% of women are predisposed to autoimmune conditions, and stress and burnout is a huge factor in this process, right? So how can women, I guess, address this and take action on their part with this knowledge?
Yeah, it starts with one thing that we all have to do, but specifically women, I would say that you have to make a healing decision for you. It starts with you making a decision. We have to understand the word in itself, deciding and making a decision, what that means. When you make a decision, the root of decision is side, C-I-D-E. That in and of itself means you cut. Side means to cut. So when you make a decision, you cut away all other possibilities, all other options are thrown away, and you move in one accord, in one purpose, one direction, without distraction, without coercion or influence from anything else. You make the healing decision for you. As women, you already have a predisposition to be the caretakers of the world. Frankly, you are the source of all life and creation. All life comes through you. So it's an extraordinary responsibility you have. You bring forth life to the world. You literally teach from the womb. You are the first teacher. And you, because you are the first teacher, you set the example. So when you are demonstrating in your own life the importance of self-care, self-value, and self-worth, and you're able to make that healing decision for yourself, you teach all others to do the same. And so it has to start with the healing decision. And everything else that we've discussed over the course of this podcast is now possible because you decided to make it so.
Damn, that was really powerful.
And it's a domino effect. It trickles into every, because if you're a woman, you're kind of, whether you realize it or not, you're, central point of a family, be your own children or even your parents, your siblings,
and even us as men. I'm like, honestly, like, seriously, like we follow you guys. Seriously, we like, we're honestly, we're like, okay, like pretty much whatever's going on with you is gonna really kind of dictate how we flow. But again, that even starts because I came through my mother. She was my first teacher, and she was teaching me from the womb. So I said the responsibility as you all as women is extraordinary. And so you have to make that decision for yourself first and foremost, because the world depends on you.
Oof.
I know.
This is like, how are we going to stop it?
Like mic drop.
Exactly, because not only it's a wisdom, and how powerful this conversation is, that is not only are we helping one individual, but indirectly, if that individual decide to take on into that journey, it's going to help a whole, it's a network effect. So definitely, thank you so much for those words.
Bites of wisdom. I wouldn't even say bites, like lifetimes of wisdom. I think I have like 7 really good quotes. I love it. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Mahdi. That was wonderful.
Really fun. Really a pleasure.
It was fun. I learned a lot. And I'm so glad that we have you as an ally for women.
Absolutely. Indeed. Yeah. You're the ones I primarily love to work with, because I see the extraordinary power of who you are and the great responsibility that you have to us as an entire species, to this world. And so our ability to become more really will come through you all, because again, you teach from the womb. You're the first teacher to us all.
Well, thank you. Oh, so wow. Thank you. Yeah.
If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and select that follow or subscribe button. For now, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.